All right, hello everyone, and welcome to Handmade Hero. We are going to do a little survey here of where we are, just for people who may not have been following for the past, or well, it's been a couple weeks. So in general, you would be forgiven for forgetting where we are. Sometimes I wonder how I don't forget where we are, because I don't seem to. Um, Hold on a second here while we set up the shell. There we go. Um, and I don't know. I guess if you just program for long enough, you keep it in your head. I don't really know how that works. It's just like lots of different program states in your head or something. Not sure. But anyway, if you take a look at the procedural generation stuff, as in world gen or something like that, yeah. Um, we've sort of done some layout code that's designed to make it so that we have an idea of where things go in the overworld. And if you run the game, it'll show you those things in sort of like a structural view, right? So, we did some code. It's probably not fantastic. We're just kind of like making some basic stuff here. But basically, the code is just something that produces these little connected islands of stuff. And each of these different colors is a different type of thing. Like red is sort of like where monsters might be more populous, right? Oh, wait. I don't remember exactly which one the way we did this. There was dungeon color, which I think was yellow, but that might be a lie. So I think it was like dungeon color was yellow, red was monsters, blue was items, and green were just rooms that are for connecting things. And so some of them, like here, may get removed entirely, like the green rooms, if they're not necessary anymore. Because you don't, like, green rooms are literally just there to make more interesting connectivity. They don't mean anything. They're not real rooms, areas of the overworld map. And so, looking at it here, you can kind of see, like, you want it to feel roughly like this, and you can see that, this map is probably, maybe it's a bit large. I don't know. I'm not sure how we want this to play. That's really a game design question, right? So maybe it's too large, I'm not sure. But in general, what I would say about it is, like, we're just going to start with this and see, where we go with it. And the idea would be that we want to fill in the world so that actually this whole, like, area around, like, within some distance of all of these rooms is, like, filled in, and also all of the lines. And so the ending, in terms of, like, what actual, like, areas have data for them, we want something that kind of would just look like a blobby version of this, right? Where it's all filled in. And what we care about, we don't necessarily care if you can get between two rooms in some other way. Like, this connectivity graph is not necessarily, doesn't have to be interpreted as a, like, mandatory, like, this has to be a, like, this has to be the only way you could get between these two things. This is just what we would consider our mandatory minimum connectivity graph. Like, we don't want to produce any resulting grid-based layouts that would cause you to be able to get to rooms in any less than this way. And the reasons for that are twofold. One, just so we can have a way of controlling that at a higher level. But two, we just have to make sure everything is reachable, right? Like, we need some way of guaranteeing, and there's many ways we could do that, but we need some way in general of guaranteeing that all of the stuff we put in the game in the procedural generation side, when we generate stuff, we have to know you can get there. And so having, like, some idea of what the minimum connectivity graph is while the lower level stuff is generating is just kind of my way of saying, well, all right, if I have something like that, sorry, I just exited. Here's another one. If I have something like this, and then I make sure that the lower level code that's going to actually put in the grid version, if I make sure that that code always respects this connectivity graph in some way, then I at least have some reasonable, I can make a reasonable assumption, right? that I'm not preventing the player from getting somewhere that they absolutely need to go. So that's pretty much it. Now, it's easier said than done because we don't really have any particular, we don't really know how we would necessarily do that. There's a couple of ways you could imagine doing that, and I'll talk about a little bit right now. But if you look at something like this connectivity graph here, there are some straightforward but not particularly good ways we could go about doing it. For example, one way would be just to actually use this line literally and just say when we are putting down grid stuff, right? You could imagine just creating like a box here and going through it and putting down like, forest tiles. Well, we could literally put a thing that says if you're within a certain distance of this literal line, don't put forest tiles, right? We could do that. I mean, there's nothing stopping us from doing that. The problem with something like that is if we literally just do just that, meaning we don't take any pains to do anything more careful, the game will feel a bit weird because you would literally walk like along like these lines exactly. And it just wouldn't, it wouldn't feel very much like a forest because forests don't have straight lines like that. Even when they're man-made lines in, even if someone's cutting a line through a forest, they don't tend to cut a straight line, right? It tends to be like more wiggly. So my assumption here is that we might want to do something where before we actually start generating the actual tiles, we like jankify the line more. Because you could imagine us taking this line and just making it like meander, right? And then if we did that, then it might not be weird to do. Right? At that point, then maybe we could literally just say, all right, now we require that anything that does fall along this line can't have a tile on it. And off we go. So, that seems like a reasonable way to do this. I mean, it seems pretty straightforward. So what I might recommend as a course of action here that we can start on, something we can just start typing, is if we go ahead and we, make something that starts to generate forest and forest tiles, right? If we did something like that, then we could start by actually using this actual graph, meaning we could do what I just said would not be good, right? Like something that will produce straight lines that you walk along. We can start there, and then when we have that working, just assume that the next step is we then make the lines meander and do that. And that seems pretty reasonable to me because this way it's easier to like program and debug the first time around because we know what we're expecting to see. If we're not like making the lines all janky, if it's literally just a straight line, it'll be very easy to look and see like, is the thing that's keeping us that line clear, is it like really doing it right? Whereas if we make this crazy line that goes all around, then it's like, oh, is it really following it right? Or, is it maybe that's how close it should be or whatever, it's probably just a little bit harder at that point to make sure that we don't have bugs in there. So maybe, just we start with a straight line one. And then assuming we have that, it shouldn't be too hard to extend that into one that takes a more complex line that has several segments instead of just one. So if nobody has any objections, I think that's probably what we'll start on. And the other thing we can try to do here is start to look at if there's going to be like sort of too much cost. So, this may be a point when we have to start thinking about our entity structure being more sane, because as we start to generate this many entities, that's going to put a lot of stress on the actual entity system, which is kind of just it's nothing special right now. And the entity system currently scales to basically infinitely sized worlds, like, because it's just caching based. But that doesn't mean it still won't be kind of slow to create stuff. So we may have to do some work there just to make sure we don't screw that up, right? I don't really know what to expect there, but there's going to be some stuff we probably have to look at there. But that's about it. And as you can see right now, all we're doing is just generating one room for with no lights, and it's just like the little dude hops around, right? That's the entirety of it. And so now what we want to do is just, generate basically a door out of here. We'll worry about generating the rest of the orphanage later because we don't really care about that right now. But so we'll have to generate like a way for him to get out of here, or we can just nerf this room entirely. Instead of generating this, we just generate forest. You start right in the forest. And then we want to see if we can start to encompass like at least some small segment of this world and prove that we can generate like some forest stuff in there that has these connections. And we also will need to do a little bit of work because in addition to all that, we want to sort of create something that says, hey, if you're too far from the actual level area, just create like basically like wall, right? Like, so there should just be like trees that are impenetrable around the perimeter because we don't really want the player wandering off into areas of the world where we haven't put anything. That's going to be like really boring and unfun for them if we just like create empty space that has nothing in it, right? That's not going to be good. So we want to kind of say wall off these areas so that there's kind of a coherent boundary where the player will clearly know that like, oh, there's nothing to do over there. Right? Yeah. Okay, so anyway, that's the basics. That's basically what we're doing. And if we go down to how this stuff actually works in practice, what you can see is that we have a thing here that will create individual locations. And what that is that's how this orphanage is getting generated. And in fact, if we wanted to, we could generate other stuff like at the other room. So for example, if you look at what happens in the create orphanage call, you can see here that it like calls the generate room thing, and then the other ones don't. So like, for example, item rooms don't generate anything. And so what I could do here is just say like, well, if I was to copy this stuff up so that item rooms now got generated, then what would happen is when we look at the other things, there would be rooms there. Now, they're not going to be paged in, so unless it's particularly close, we wouldn't actually see anything there. And that's kind of a unfortunate downside of this. Like, if we don't create an area big enough to actually get to something, we won't actually be able to see that it's created. But if I was to hack something in, so let's say, for example, with this create orphanage thing, if I want to, I think I could just push this so it's much bigger. I don't actually know what this will do, so you'll have to forgive me for being ridiculous here. But like, let's say we change this to a massive room, so that maybe we would have a chance of getting out towards the place where, well, I guess there were no item rooms in that vicinity, but maybe there's something else. Like, so there's a connection room. So I don't know if those get called at all right now, but let's take a look. So those green rooms are connection rooms, which do we do anything with? Nav room, that's what they're called. Yeah, we do. So if I went in here and added something to the nav room, then like in theory, we could now go see if that's actually being created. But I think that's basically all that's happening, right? Is that code is getting called. And so now, like, if we went over to this nav room, we would expect to actually see there being a nav room like there. If this is working, which it might not be, right? But you can see all I did is I told it to create like a massive room here that's just really, really large for no reason. And it looks like we are, but it's offset for some reason. So that's something to look at because that looks a little bit broken. Like that, it looks like it's shifted over, and I don't know why that would be, right? So if we look at how this code is working, like it's placing a debug marker at this lock P, and it looks like it's shifted, and I'm not sure why. So that's like a good thing we should probably debug, because that's just some garbage that's happening probably because of the way that we're placing things down in the room or whatever. So we want to probably fix that. And I guess I don't know what place debug marker actually does for the size of the marker. It looks like it just adds this radius to the thing, which should, which should work just fine. So this, I would think, should still place it at the center. And the reason for that is you're taking the XY coordinates and you're doing a -4 +4. So you would think that that would basically place it in that center region. So I'm not sure why it wouldn't be doing that. And I'm kind of interested to know. So if I start again, are they consistently that way? And this is just me trying to learn. I mean, I guess that one doesn't have any, unfortunately. So just have to kind of generate till I see another one. That's very interesting. So you can see it's shifted again, but it's shifted inconsistently. So it's shifted up from the point by the opposite direction. The other one was over here, and this one is over there. So that makes me wonder a couple things. So the first thing that comes to mind is I'm kind of wondering, does that mean there's some kind of a weird scale issue where when we draw the debug markers, the scale on the debug markers is wrong compared to the way that we actually place entities or something, right? Because that would be the obvious first guess, is if everything's, if things are further away from where they're supposed to be in the direction of the origin, or I should say going outward from the origin, which that clearly is. Like it's a line that basically goes right through the origin. I think this is at 0, 0, 0, right? That is just very suspicious. So, if the scaling on those was incorrect, where for some reason it's scaling this differently than what it would do for the layout, I mean, would produce exactly that result. So that's kind of confusing, and I don't know why that would occur, but I wanted to really quickly look to see if we did something stupid in like the place where we're drawing these, for example. So here's where we're drawing the room information. And when we do this, we're drawing it in a render group. So my question would be, is this render group? Yeah. So, okay. So that actually, now that I think about it, is probably what we should have expected to have happen. It's just, didn't quite think it through. So this is shifted. This is being drawn in the origin space of whatever the world coordinate system is, right? So basically, when we move this forwards, and if we shift to a new simulation region, we would then shift it by that much, I think. So right now, we don't really have the simulation region shifting because I don't think there's another room. If there was another room, it would. In fact, let me just make another room, because now I would like to know, I want to know the answer to that question. Okay. So in generate room, we need some way to, in fact, what I might do is just turn off the boundaries. So this on boundary equals false part here. So maybe the spec, when we create the orphanage, I'm going to say the room spec is outdoors to see if the on boundary thing goes away. But we probably need one more thing other than that, would be my guess. So it still puts some trees around the outside, though. Do they stop us? They do. So it still puts trees there, so I might have to make this not create those trees. So on edge equals false, for example. And if I do on edge equals false, then I think it will just not create any edges. Yeah. So then what I should be able to do is create multiples of these. Again, that just is very suspicious, though. So I'm not even sure about what I was saying. So I guess what I'm saying can't be true. I was saying, like, it should shift the origin. But look at what's happening here. When we're looking at these two rooms, this one is shifted differently than this one, and they're both in the same origin system right now. So again, just something really weird happening there that I'm not sure about. So we should go figure out why that's happening, because I don't actually know. It seems to be creating the rooms just fine. Yeah. But we're not actually able to... and since I have on boundary set to false, it's not creating the actual wall to stop me. So I can actually enter the other rooms as well. So there you go. Right. So that's all fine. But again, and I think we could start doing what I said we wanted to do today just right now. But I just am not comfortable with that. So I would rather just make sure that we actually get that sorted. And there you could see changing the simulation center, right, between there and there. So it changes the origin, but it's still offset incorrectly. So what I was hypothesizing is not actually true. It's something else. So why is that happening? Why are we getting different positions for some things, but also not for others? Because if you go back to here, this one seems to be actually centered, right? So is this some kind of a thing that happens with scaling the way that we're scaling, like, our world coordinates or something? I can't offhand think of why that would be the case. Because, like, when we place the debug marker, we're just doing this map into chunk space thing here for world positions, right? And so I don't see why that would produce, like, any other... Well, I guess maybe is generate room going to do something weird here? So when we do begin grid, like, how is that working? So it is using the minimum tile, right? It's using the part of the volume that's supposedly the minimum part. It's looking at the... It's looking at the total dimension. Which is in tiles. So hold on a second here. Like, if we look at the nav room code that I just dropped in there, this code right here. Oh. Huh. Okay. So actually, this is just because this is in tiles. So tiles are not so it's just a different scale. Like that's all this is. When we did create navroom, like so when we place the debug markers are being placed with actual coordinates, right? So like when we do place debug marker, that's just making 2 world positions and saying off you go. But here it's calling chunk position from tile position to make a grid edit. So yeah, these two things are in totally different spaces. And I don't know that we care about that because, like I said, I was just randomly spamming a room in there, but that's not how we're normally going to do it. So maybe that's fine. It is a little weird though because like when we would want to be able to say we're going to do the room where the room actually is. Right? So that's a bit strange. So I don't really know what I want to do there, but let's suppose we wanted these things to line up properly, and I say begin grid edit. When we look at this volume, you can see that it's just being used to, like, that's not an actual use of it. That's just the word volume. It's being used strictly to fill out these two things. The total tile count for where the grid goes, and then where it goes. And the chunk position from tile position, which you can see here, that's actually, you can see where we're getting the scale problem, right? The tile dim here is not going to be the same as 1. It's not going to be 1, 1, 1. So that's where we were getting that scale difference. I was 100% right that it was a scale difference. I just didn't guess where it came from. So, how do I want to do this? I mean, one thing we could do is just say, no, all of those things are going to be in tiles now. And that seems fine because what I could do is just say chunk position from tile position. So, in other words, like if I go, let's just try this because maybe this is the more sensible thing, especially because we know we're sort of doing more 2D stuff now than we were. Maybe when we do place debug marker, we really don't want to be calling any of these things at all. Maybe where we actually want to do is call chunk position from tile position. So we want to do that, right? And when we get back the world position, we just use them differently. So in here, we are trying to create, there's no earlier part there. So it's an abs tile for each of these. So we'd literally just round the damn thing, right? We would literally just round the damn thing. So a Gen V3 is just literally a bunch of those. And so what we could do is we could say, let's generate this guy. By just passing in like the rounded versions of these. And maybe this is dumb. I don't know. I'm just not saying this is good. I'm just saying it seems like reasonable. And then we put in the 2 p-values here. Now, one assumes, like, in fact, maybe we would back this out slightly and just do just the first transform and then let these two create the bounds. So there's just like a center P, or I should say, there's just like a center P here. And so the world position centipede just comes from the rounding. So this would be chunk position from tile position. And this would be like, yeah, chunk position from tile position. Abs tile x is the rounded version of px. I don't like that. Damn it. I want to be... I don't like anything about that. But alright. So I want to round these two coordinates, and there's no z anymore. So z is always just 0. And there's no additional offset. So I guess we're just doing just that, right? And so that would create sort of something based around this position in tiles. Which means that if I now look at the map is maybe too big. Like, we may want to scale that back, right? Like I said, I think that's just probably too big. So we can introduce a scaling factor here. Like, we can just have a scale. And we can do whatever we want. And this is actually kind of interesting because it also is like, well, okay, if we want to scale these back, I guess I would scale, maybe I would scale them in the previous code so that it lines up again. But, you know, that is probably more what we want. Excuse me. All right. So let's suppose we want a scale of about half on these things, right? And this is kind of annoying the way that's doing the indentation, but oh well. I only have to use this particular thing once a week, and that's fine. So let's go ahead and assume we're going to do that. And so when we do our actual location stuff, and we're picking these like min and max distances, if everything wants to be about half, we can just bake that in to this stuff, right? And that seems like it should be okay. So maybe we do something like this. In fact, maybe I just do, okay, there's a scale of 1.0, and all this thing, everything here gets multiplied by that for no real reason other than I'm lazy, right? And then we can just kind of adjust that scale. I don't know what the heck these values are even doing, really. These are for connectivity stuff. But one assumes that if we just keep scaling everything by the exact same values, then we should be able to just turn this over to this single scale value. And then if we set that down, it'll just shrink how big the world is without really doing much else. I think. We'll find out in a second. So there's the current size, like I said, which is going to be too big because now it's in, it's in tiles. Let's see if this is still generating. I mean, it still generates basically the same thing as far as I can tell. For the most part, right? That's kind of crazy. What is that? So it looks like there's something kind of buggy there, though. So that didn't quite, like... Is that something that is happening because of the tiling? Because that definitely seems wrong to me. I don't see any obvious reasons why that would happen, though. just, it should have been fairly scale invariant, I think, but it's hard to say. So that's looking a little janky there, so I'm not sure about that. So we should probably look at that a little more carefully. What the heck is generator rate? Ah, that is not right. All right, but I don't know that that is... Since scale is 1.0, that wouldn't have changed anything yet. Like, we didn't actually change those numbers. So it was kind of weird. Why were we seeing those weird, really elongated connections? Because that doesn't seem like it should have been happening. So that's a bit weird and probably bad. But we'll see. Sometimes it still seems to generate reasonable stuff. But that seemed kind of weird for whatever reason. Maybe that was just a strange case that could have happened before, and we just never encountered it, so we didn't think it was there. Like, what is happening? Like, how is that happening? That just seems total garbage, right? Like, there's no way it would ever have done those picks. So there's something wonky going on there that we have to look at, because that's not plausible based on what the algorithm's supposed to do. So there's definitely a bug there. It could be something like it gave up in one of these loops, which, you know, we didn't really have a plan for, because it's kind of doing some loose layout stuff there. But, you know, something's busted. So we know that there's something wrong. We just don't know exactly what it is. Let me go ahead and shrink it by 0.5 and see if that works at all for now, because we maybe don't want to really do the debugging on that part of it at the immediate moment. That looks fine. That looks pretty good. It's much tighter now, which is kind of what I was hoping for. But we still have these really weird behaviors with nav boxes. Like, something really messed up is going on with those nav boxes. None of what you see here should be happening at all. It's totally messed up. So something broke. I guess when we switched to doing those, when we switched to using tiles for where the markers are, but since that's just a scale, I guess it's because there's an... I mean, I guess maybe it's because it's a non-user... It wouldn't explain how wrong it was, though. I mean, okay. Here's the thing we could do. We didn't really make any changes, right? So if I just undo them, can we make this happen in the original version that looked like this? Right? So here's just what we started with. Will it still occur? And so let me just run it a few times and see if I can make it do that again. Yeah, okay, so you know, it's not us, right? This was just, there's some kind of bug in here that somehow we didn't see the other day. But, like, it's a very severe bug. Like, extraordinarily severe. Because not only would this not be something we would expect to see locked in here, but it should never have tried to connect these two rooms. So it's just complete nonsense what's being shown here. Now, what's interesting is it only seems to happen on generations where I am manually doing it here. And so I'm wondering, is this like an uninitialized variable kind of a thing where we're not setting something, and so somebody gets, there's like cruft rooms in there? And that I don't know. When we do create world, you can see it doing this call to create world here. And when we do that, you can see it does a begin world gen and then a layout overworld. So we could look and see, is there something funny going on here? So we do a bootstrap push struct here for the world generator. And is there probably, this is just a case of like default arena params not being for clearing. No, they are. So it should have been cleared. It should be clear to 0, right? Bootstrap push size. So if it calls bootstrap push size, where is that? Where did I stick that function? So that should be clearing, right? It should be doing a push size with those params and clearing the value. So when we come in here, this should all be clear. We wouldn't expect there to be anything still lying around. So yeah, that's a bit strange. Okay, so let's take a look at what happens from there. I guess it's layout overworld. So we create some random numbers for dungeons, item, monsters, and nav, right? We do all that plus 1. We push an array on the temp memory, and we try to make that many locations. I mean, it doesn't look particularly suspicious. It might be nice to assert. So I assume when we do push location, we assert that we don't overflow the limit, right? So we know we're pushing the right number on, in theory. So yeah, I don't really see. I don't see what the big deal is. I don't see what Chunky's deal is. So that's very suspicious, and I don't know what to make of it. And like I said, I also don't know why I can't get one of those on the initial lie. Now, part of it is it takes a long time, right? You have to it takes 4 that time or whatever. So maybe it just never happens as the first one. But if it happens 1 in 4 times and it never happens on startup, I mean, is that one? No. I mean, yes, that is actually, right? Like, those 2 rooms should never have been connected. So let's take a look of what's going on, because now I'm just scared of what may have gotten typed in here. So let's take a look. So we go through the locations and we look to see. Effectively, all we're doing is saying if these 2 things are within 60 units of each other, then we loop through all the other locations that aren't this one, that aren't the 2 we're checking, right? In other words, for every pair of locations, we look to see does this connection fall too close, right, by using distance between line segment and point? Now, I suppose this could be a buggy routine, right? If this routine is messed up, that would do it, right? It's returning the squared length, which is what we expect. And we're checking to see, so if the delta length is whatever the length is of how far we're going, the direction vector is then it's just normalizing going from L0 to L1, right? So going from A to B. We're then looking at the inner product between the two, right? And saying we're going to clamp that at the original length because we're not going to let ourselves go further than the original length along this vector to get to the closest point. That's just how line segments work, right? So then we're going to go that far out the direction and look to see what the distance is from that point to the point in question. That seems fine. And this can only add purple lines. So we would know, like we would see if it's a white line, it means it got added by this piece of code. This piece of code, it would show up purple, right? I say. All right. So under add world connection, that just spams them in there. Yeah, so I don't see why that's misbehaving. It doesn't look that suspicious to me. But it's fairly consistent. Like, it's not that hard to make this happen. And it kind of feels like it just all falls apart at once. Like, you can see that it's just like, this is all just messed up. But why? And is there any pattern to it? Like some of these, like that, goes from there all the way to there, I think. And so what's weird about that is that doesn't even feel, that feels like more than 60, which means it doesn't even feel like that, if it were working properly, should have passed this check, let alone this one. So that's a bit of a puzzler. it feels almost like those rooms got like moved or something, like after they were connected or something like that. Which doesn't seem like it should really be possible, but maybe there's some other bug that's going on in here. So, because like after, so, you know, after we do layout overworlds, we loop through these and we, you know, place each one of them down. And we set some debug color stuff for rooms in the world thing, but that doesn't really matter. So yeah, I don't, you know. So I'm interested to know now. So like, what could I do? I'm trying to think of like, what could I do to start to debug this particular piece of code? Like, what's gonna tell me? What data can I collect about how this is running? So I guess the first thing I would do is turn this off. So let me see what it looks like when we draw a bunch of red lines that connect everything together but are being rejected. Right? So now there should be like red lines between, you know, and you can see them here, like these are ones that got rejected. Now let's actually go. Well, no, I suppose so. That literally means they passed the 60 distance test, and but they were passing too close to something else, right? So like when we look, it's like, okay, that, you know, I guess it passes too close to this guy, which is a bit weird. But yeah, so all of these are getting removed for violating that principle, which is what we want, right? So now let's find one of those ones that's all messed up and see what is marked red in that case. This, I think, is still fine. Not able to get it to do it right now. That. So now, like, if you look at this, you can so plainly see that, like, how the heck is that to that, which does not pass very close to this thing, getting marked as red, but that all the way to there? Like, first of all, that's clearly too far. Is it because of this thing getting removed? Okay, so here's the question. We did this weird removal thing. Did we screw up that? Is that what's causing this problem? So, like, is this the problem? So let's suppose we delete this code. Right, it's gone. This was the code that was there to like do some kind of weird stuff with nav rooms where we didn't want nav rooms that were unnecessary or whatever. We would just got rid of or whatever. Is this code buggy? Because if this code is buggy, what could be happening is when we change like something about the room connections here, we're screwing up like this code right here is making it connect back to something that it shouldn't connect back to. It doesn't... That doesn't seem plausible to me. But let's just find out. So if we should be able to make it still do the thing, if that's not what the code, who is responsible, we should be able to get this thing to do that again. And it does not seem to be doing it. Okay, so is the thing that we screwed up that there actually is a room 0? Can that really be it? That shouldn't have caused this bug, though. We're going to have to go see exactly why that's causing this bug. So does that make a lot of sense? Oops. But I cannot seem to get it to do the buggy behavior without that. Like, all of these are super nice. So how would this, if we believe that, if we believed that, why would setting the 2 rooms to be 0, how could that possibly cause this problem? So when we're drawing this, this is the code. And when we do a connection between the 2 worlds, like you see here, if they were both the same world, if they were both world 0, then what we would expect to see, presumably, is this line segment call not drawing a line segment because it's getting 2 points that are the same. Right? This doesn't touch anything. It just modifies the connection count. This changes location A, which is the one that we're looking at first. To be a world lock none. Which, is there something about that we should be concerned about? Like, I don't know why that would be. If it's none, it just gets skipped. Oh, dude. Oh, man. That is just... Do you know how I say... I've said this on the stream so many times. How many times have I said this on the stream? For those of you that have watched a lot of the stream. What do I say every time? Whenever anyone asks me, they're like, "Oh, yeah, can you look at my new stupid language that I made?" And I go look, and it's 50,000 new frickin' features to do with, like, memory management or whatever, which I don't give a crap about and would save me, like, no time, right? They just add all these features that I don't give a crap about. What's the one thing that I say is always, always, always the source of, like, every single frickin' bug? Indexes. It's indexes. It's like someone, for the love of God, make a language that makes indexing work easier, right? That's what this is. If we set this guy to none, he will not create a room, which means all of the connections, their indexes are now off by 1. Right? You see what I'm saying? Like, show me a language that catches that bug cleanly, and then I will actually give a crap about your stupid language. Okay. So anyway, that is exactly what's happening. When we turn on this piece of code, what happens is when we set lock a type to world lock none, then what's going to happen is the room's not going to get created. Now, this isn't a bug in any particular sense of the word, because we don't actually care about that right now, but our debug display does. So it's going to draw these lines to all the wrong indexes. So it doesn't really affect our world generation. Our world generation would still actually probably work just fine, because those indexes line up just fine. But the other set of indexes does not. Make sense? So that's what that is. That's what that is. So there's a couple ways we could do that, where we could, fuss with it. I mean, one way is just to leave this out, because I'm not sure we really wanted it anyway. If we do want to leave it in, then all we really need to do is actually keep track of the indexes so that they go through the pipe. So that instead of having just one index, we've got 2. We do the indexes of the generator stuff, and then we actually go to generate things. If we want to still draw lines between them, we make sure we track which indexes they actually are when they get created. I'm going to go ahead and say for now, I'm just going to go turn this off because I don't know what I want to do. But I'm going to leave a big old to-do here on it so that if I do come back to it, I won't make that mistake. All right. All right, so I'm glad we kind of got both of those things straightened away. And so now, in theory, I should be able to do the scaling operation I want, just in general. Now, there's a couple ways I could do that. One is to introduce a scale factor, like I did before. Another is to just scale everything after the fact, which I also could do. And so, like, if, for example, we look at the layout, well, I guess this is the function in here. So if we look at this layout overworld thing, all it does is just push locations on the thing, right? So what I could do is say, screw it, let's just do it after the fact. So in here where we have these world gen locations and they've got the P, we can just shrink them when we want to shrink them. So I could set world scale here. I could go over all of the world locations that exist like this. And then I could just say like, okay, you know what, you're gonna get scaled by the world scale, so that now I can just like ignore all the rest of the fancy foo-foo and just have a value that I play with here. So that normally I run it, this is what it's actually doing inside, but if I think that's too sparse, I can say, all right, let's, shrink that down by a half. And now everything just gets closer together and more smooshed, right? And so now things look like this. And maybe that's what I want. Maybe it's not. But now there's just a single value I can play with that just does that condense at the end, and that's better. Now, I also do want to do the thing that I was doing before when we were like, what is this bug? Now that the bug is gone. I do now want to make debug markers and tiles, I guess, will be the same. Now, there's a little bit of a weird thing that happens here, which is that if I actually do that, then we kind of have this weird situation. So I almost want to say, maybe what we actually want to do there is just pre-adjust these to be tiles now, like at this stage. Or I should say, pre-adjust them to be tiles when we go to do generate room. You know what I mean? And so that's a bit hard to say. But like in here, so I want to start doing the nav rooms now. We look at how we're doing this room vault thing. Maybe this is just the thing that I want to fix, where I actually express the thing in tiles by dividing by the tile dim first. Like, that's not very difficult, right? You could imagine just doing a thing where we get that back. So we say something like, hey, now would be a good time to give me a gen v3. Isn't that, oops, gen not capitalized. So I want to do something like tile from point or something like that. And we pass our actual, our actual world space point, and we make the result be pre-rounded to the tile boundaries. Right? So we round px and py like we were going before, but instead we divide by the tile dim. And so that just makes these two coordinate systems line up, right? So we would say, okay, tile from point. We would now say when we're going to make one of these room vaults, and I don't know, we probably have a way of creating one of these. Do we? Not really, oddly enough. Yeah, I guess we don't really. Well, all right. So anyway, if we want to create one of these room vaults, then we would get the tile from point. So we'd say like, okay, what's the gen v3 for the center point, and we'd just say like tile from point, this p value, right? And then in here we would just say now we're going to use the center p. It doesn't need to be rounded anymore or truncated or whatever else you want to do to it because it's already correctly in tile space. And then, in theory, this thing lines up now. Now, the orphanage, because it happens to be at 0, 0, would have lined up anyway. But now let's go ahead and try it with some other rooms and see what happens. So if I drop this garbage in to, like, the other things. So here's like, I don't know, a bunch of me generating these rooms. I'm gonna need this tile from point to be up here somewhere. Probably along with that point, it was like, what was it, like map? It was like, it wasn't map into chunk space, but it was like tile. It was like a chunk position from top to that. So it'd be like that, right? It's this, basically. So now those should line up, right? And they do, right? So you can see that all of that is now lining up kind of nicely. And of course, it stops at a certain point because remember, this is all like dynamically paged, so none of this part of the world is paged in, but you can see that we successfully created it all as you would expect, right? Okay, so now what we need, like I said, is we need to create something where we're going to be filling this data in a more fancy way, right? Something. We need to fill this in a fancier way because we need to fill in all the connective tissue in between rooms, and so we need to kind of march through it, creating, pieces as we go. And I don't have a particular idea about how that's going to work. There's two parts of that. One is that we kind of need some way of knowing that we have covered everything. And that is probably going to be something where we just kind of march through space, like adding stuff as necessary. I guess. Something like that. Sorry for the mouth fart. Sometimes you just got a mouth fart when you're trying to think about things. So, that's all fine, but, but we would need some kind of an idea of how we're gonna, how we're gonna rasterize, We're going to want to march through these things. And so, what we're doing here is not really what we want, right? What we're doing here is we're just saying, well, drop in here and create tiles around where the rooms are. And that's fine. But what we need to start doing is filling them in. Using a union of two rectangles would give us a way to fill that in, right? For each connection, we could do that. And maybe that is how we do that. But then we start to we're going to have to how we want to handle the overlapping regions. And it kind of seems like that's just what you would do. I mean, that's a pretty easy way to do it. And so maybe we just do that. It does seem like we could probably come up with something a little bit better. Like maybe we just take all of the first order connections of a thing and then do that. And we're going to want to do some other stuff. Like, we're going to want this to work where we, because we want to move towards more of an actual grid system. Like, we kind of did some of that. We removed Z from some of the stuff. But we kind of want to do more of that as we go. And so we're probably going to want that to happen more too, with the way that we probably want an actual grid now, so that we can work, not overall, because we still want to be able to have very large worlds if we want to. We don't want to break that functionality because that's kind of nice. But we do want to have it so that we can ask questions about what's at a particular grid square without it being a huge deal. Right. So that part, when we start to do, we'll probably have to reckon with that pretty soon. So I guess I don't have a good idea. So I think I might just start by doing the unioned version of these things and just see what happens, man. And that's just going to be like, yeah. I mean, okay. So let's be clear. One way of doing things, which I suspect we don't really want to do, but maybe we do. One way of doing things is we literally just subdivide the entire region, and then we could literally just do like, you know, a coarse grid over it. And if there's anything in a region, we just rasterize the region. And that might actually be what we want. It's going to be like super slow until we have an acceleration structure, but I'm just going to do that. Screw it. So I'm going to say we're just going to go with that approach, as dumb as that sounds. And we're just going to like see where that takes us, because it just feels like the so sensible thing, honestly. So in here where I did that world scale thing, there was like a scale thing. This piece of code, I think all I'm going to do is just store these boundaries. So like, I believe we have a rectangle 3 in here. We even have a rectangle 2, apparently. So if I created a rectangle 2, I assume I've got a union function for my rectangle 2. I don't actually know, and it's impossible to tell because that's the listing, apparently. But yeah, so we can do a union here, and I think that's good enough. So if I just said we're going to do a world bounds thing, and this is going to be like an inverted infinity rectangle because nothing is in it at first, right? So it's just completely empty. Then for each location, I do world bounds, you know, equals the union of the current world bounds and whatever this thing is. And this thing is a rect centered dim kind of a thing, which this guy. So I just say like, okay, take that XY coordinate and whatever I want the like fluffy version of this thing to be. I don't know what that should be, but let's just pretend for sake of the quote unquote argument that is going to be like, I don't know, 30 by 20. I actually don't want half dim, but I guess I have to have it. So center dim, that's it, center dim. So if I want like 30 by 20 or something like that, and we can adjust this to whatever we want, but like, you know, let's suppose it's that. Then that will produce basically the complete like fillable region that you could potentially walk through. I guess I can't do... Can we do... Can we make a V2 from a V3 easily? Anyone? Oops. Anyone? No? So there is an XY there. So what is that a world? Is that actually, because it's a world gen location, using some other nonsense? Oh, because it's already a V2. Hi, I'm an idiot. We didn't actually use V3s for that. Making a mountain out of a molehill. So this would be the world bounds, and then in the world struct here, I don't know, like, this is not really a thing, but we could put this in as a world room for no reason. It's not a world room, right? It's not a world room at all, but I could make it be as if it was a world room. So like the place debug marker call, excuse me, I could add a room that's not a real room. And I of course need to get this world bounds out here somewhere. And I need to do it after we're done, because otherwise the world indexes, we now know, don't screw with the world indexes, right? That's a bad, don't screw with the room indexes, I should say. That's a very bad idea. So yeah, be careful. But we can then go in here and say, okay, the world position from the world bounds, assuming that we have them. So assuming we know what the world bounds are, it's just like the min and the max of that. So like the rectangle 2, it's just this and this are the 2 points we're going to draw, and that would just let us see what is the shape, you know, what does the world look like in terms of what its shape is for the rooms. And the debug color for that can just be, I don't know, that can probably be white. It's just going to be a big box around everything. So the world bounds have to come from somewhere, and I think they're probably going to come from the world gen struct. I think I'd want this to be in here somewhere, so that there's just like, I don't know, just like a rectangle 2 that's like world bounds that's in there. And that way, when we actually generate, when we do the layout thing or whatever, we just store it in there. And this can get it later, but we're going to want that for various purposes. Like, there's multiple reasons why people are probably going to want to look at that, so it should just be there after layout completes. You can just look at that piece of information. What are you complaining about? That seems kind of odd. Oh, no it doesn't. End world gen is going to get rid of the generator code. Isn't it? Yeah. So probably don't want to do that. Don't know why I put it after the thing that frees the entire batch. So that produces the map for us, right? And there it is. It looks like it's a little bit too snuggly. So maybe we were a little bit aggressive with our scale, right? I don't know. But we may well have been. So if we take a look at that and we just bump it up a little, so we say like, okay, it's actually going to be like 0.7 or something. We still got to fix that. Like, it can't always lay out the world with the tolerances that we gave it. That's kind of a bummer, but that algorithm will improve over time anyway. So that's the world, and there's the like boundary that we picked, which again is just basically the boundary of all of the things together plus a little bit of, you know, breathing room, right? And so now if we just march through here and actually create entities in places where we think we might need them, you know, that would probably do it. So I guess we could start with a few kind of simple things here, which are not too complicated. So we could literally just do like march through all of these. I mean, it would take forever. But we could literally march through every single one of these things and just rasterize it out. And like, yeah, it's going to be super slow, but it's okay because we're just getting started. We could obviously speed it up quite a bit and also skip areas where there's not much happening. But so let's go ahead and do a pretty simple approach here. So let's suppose on here we want to actually step through that entire thing. Then when we're so this wouldn't really do what it's doing here, right? Like this thing would not create any actual rooms. So we would do, and I'd even remove the one from the orphanage, but we would do this, and they would only place the debug markers. Wouldn't do anything else. And then we would step through here, creating those rooms based on, and we could do a really simple one at first to show you what I mean. But like, so when we call generate room, this nonsense here, we wouldn't really be doing this anymore. We would step through and we would do like room volume edits, like blah, 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 blah. Right. So to do that, in here, we would just, I don't know, generate chunk, generate block. I don't have a particularly good room for it. A good name for it. There would be none of this. But there would be what volume, right? And it's really a rectangle. It's not a volume, because we don't actually care about doing it in 3D. But we're kind of slowly working our way back to that, right? So if we want to in here do it as part of the volume, it's going to be this exact thing, same idea, right? And then this is going to be a thing that would tell us where we are in the actual world from the local edits that we're making. And then we would just see the simplest possible thing we could do is the very slow loop over everything and see where we are, right? So the way that would work is literally this code right here, right? And I'm even going to get rid of the one that generates the orphanage, because we're gonna try and generate the orphanage as well as part of this pass. So we would look through and we'd say, are we in one of these rooms that we're trying to talk about, right? Like, are we in one? And if we are, we generate empty space. And if we're not, then we generate like a tree wall, right? So that's all I'm going to do at the very outset here. I'm just going to do a thing that's like open or not, right? Like, is walkable. And that's all we're going to try and do. And then we're going to come through here and like steal this code a little bit and just take a look at what's the simplest thing that we can do to place, something down. Now there's other stuff here for like how the camera works, and we're going to have to do something about that, but I don't know what it's going to be right now. So we're just going to use the debug camera in the meantime, and then we'll figure out how we want to do cameras, because in the overworld map, we may want to do a thing that's literally just like, if there is no camera volume, like if you're not if the player is not inside a camera control volume, then it's just scroll, right? It's just free scroll. Because, you know, you're on the overworld map, so there aren't like rooms, you know? So here's some garbage code that we have, and that again, most of this stuff should probably be like pretty heavily simplified at this part, but you know, we're simplifying different parts at different times, so you just kind of have to roll with those punches. So you can see here there's like basically a thing where we have our place tree. And so I think we're going to have these on opposite sides of the branch of this probably. So we would go here like, okay, there's going to be a sim space traversable. We probably have to add that. And then either the tree's on the traversable or not, it looks like. So it's probably just going to be like this. Right? If it's not walkable, we stick a tree on it. And that's it at the moment. So let's take a look at what the part is for making like an actual like cube here. So we're going to need this. We don't really care about this. This code is so terrible. All right. So let's see. Spec outdoors is always true here. So we're always going to cover it that way. Randomize top. So that's how the piece that we actually add for this thing. All right. So here's the entity. We always create one because there's going to be a floor or not. Right. Setting the position for it. What is P set to initially? It's just get min center P. I don't know what edit tile contents. We don't really care about that. And so it's probably just this guy right here where we add this particular block. Is probably all we really need. Right, so we would say like, okay, there's the color of the piece. We need the volume. And the wall height is 0.5. Yeah, this is so terrible. Should probably just take a hatchet to literally all this stuff. Because now that we know what we're actually doing, we don't need 90% of this code, which is usually the way. I mean, that's why I always am like, yeah, most things can be rewritten in 1/100th of the code. So I think it's just that, right? We make a volume from this thing. We're going to see whether or not this thing is walkable. We create an entity for it. We place the entity. We need to set the entity position, but it doesn't seem like we are doing that for some reason. So where does it set the entity position? Oh, so it just does that, I guess. Yeah. So we set the parameters on the entity. We add a piece for the cube block thingy. We make sure we generate a random thing for a variant in case there ever are artistic variants of them. We set some of this stuff for like tile type and stuff here, but we can just pass that directly. So it's always a floor right now. It's always grass. We always have ground cover. We always randomize the top. It's always traversable. And I guess that's it. But I mean, I don't know why we would do this, because isn't that just this value right here? So I mean, I think it's just this value. So when we place the tree, I don't know what the ground P part is there. In fact, it doesn't seem to need that. So yeah, so let's start with that. It's probably wrong, because this is way too complicated. But yeah, so for placing the entity on the traversable, that should be sufficient. So I think that's it. I mean, it's not good, but I think that's basically it. You know? I think that's basically it. All right. Anyway, so content structural ID that's from the tile contents thing. I don't know what the heck that's even supposed to mean, because the entity that's on here is just us. Like, we just created it, right? So the entity that we're talking about is just this entity, as far as I know. So I'm not sure what the point of any of that crap is either. So I think it's just that. And so that should create, as we iterate over these things, that should create just basically some grass. And it's going to be all trees because it's not walkable. So let's do the opposite of that for the moment and just set it to true. And then let's swap out just to see if we pass it the volume that we're currently passing it for the orphanage, will it do anything? And that's just for us trying to figure out like whether this works at all, right? So generate block. There we go. And we don't pass a spec anymore because we don't have that concept. we gotta fix that. Unpack is open. So right, when we do generate block, we have to close the grid because we start the grid, but we never end the grid edit. So that should be happening at the end, at the very end. So like right here. Okay. Oh dear. That does not seem good at all. So I think because the camera is not set to anything. So yeah, and like I said, I don't really know what we're going to do about that. When we generate a room, we were putting in these like things that let the camera know where they should be. We don't have one of those right now. That's going to be a problem. So if we look at this, like I guess we would just do something like this. For now, which is just garbage, but it's like, look, we're just going to add a bunch of these random things that tell you where to place the camera, right? And that's just so it has somewhere to go. So that's what happens if you pass one of these. And you can see that it just created like a little patch of grass and no lights, right? The light is just coming from the hero right now. And so now what happens is I want to see if we can just do a quick sort of implicit version of the scan out where we just say, all right, when we generate a block here, let's go over all of the locations. And if you're within some distance from a certain location, we could even do this for the connections. We just don't add a tree, and if you are, then we do, right? So we could do, just to make sure the tree thing is working properly, we could do is on edge and say if you're not on the edge, then it's not, right? And this is just to test to make sure that it does place trees properly because we don't actually know if it does. So I'm going to try it just to see if it does before I do something more complicated. So let's see if it placed the trees properly. I mean, there are some trees there, and I can't walk through them. So that means that as long as we produce that switch properly, we should be able to get what we want. Okay, so let's suppose that we're going to do a is walkable, and we assume that is walkable is false for now. We loop over all of the locations and maybe even all of the connections. So if we look at world gen here, we say, okay, there's connections and there's other. We should also probably switch for connections to be an actual thing instead of looking at the world. They should be in the gen struct. That's a different thing, but we should do that as well. And then we just say, hey. In fact, what we could do is use this code right here, in fact. So if we have we have a room connection that goes between two things, and we have A and B. And I want to know if the distance between A and B, if it's close to us. So basically, like the position for our like this abs index, for example, right? So we want to ask what that abs index is in world units, probably. I mean, I don't know that we actually do. We might want to do it in tiled units. I'm not sure. Because we would like the world generation stuff to be more robust. So it's hard to say how exactly we want to do that. But so when we say get min z center p here, this p value for the tile, that's all like relative. So that's not really going to help us. So what we actually want is this abs index here, and we want the abs p, which would just be the abs index. We don't care about this. In fact, this is a v2 for all we care about. Right, so the abs index here, right, it's just the floating point versions of these two times the tile dim. Right? That's going to be the abs p. And so if we look and we say, well, in absolute space, like, okay, what is the distance for these things? Like, how far is it? And if the distance is less than, I don't know, 5 meters in either direction, then it's walkable, right? Something like this. Similarly in here, when we look at like the location A, I'd just be like, look, maybe we'll do rectangles a little bit later, but for right now, we'll just say, look, if the length squared of the position minus the place where we are, if that's less than 10, then it's walkable as well. And again, just garbage, total garbage here that I'm throwing in there, which is just taking a look to say, okay, here's how, we call this a Hadamard product in this code base, don't we? Yeah. Like, look, we're just going to do this and see what happens if we do scan out. It's going to take forever because we're going to have to now run it across the whole thing. But maybe we can just even do it in less than that at first and just do a subset of it so it doesn't take too long. But anyway, so, okay, we've got create orphanage, this kind of nonsense doing the generate block. Let's move that down to like here or something. And now what we're going to do is we're going to loop over like the entire tile bounds of this thing. Like every last damn tile. And we're going to do it in like chunks so that we can do each individual part, like so that we don't generate too many entities at once so that they can be processed by like the world system or whatever, right? I love that people are still talking about pots and walks from the pre-stream. I like that. Okay. So, okay, fine. We now want to divide this up into some size chunks. And so we want to take the actual tile information, which is that like this stuff here, right? So if I ask tile from point and I say gen v3 min tile p or min tile index and max tile index or something, and in here I just ask for the min and max of the world bounds, so I get the two of these, and then I just say, look, let's divide this up into some number on each dimension. So I say, I don't know, maybe we want to do like let's say like the block dimension is just going to be like 32 by 32 or something, right? So then we would say, okay, like x count is going to be the min tile, the max tile I, x minus the min tile I y, min tile I x, plus the block dim minus 1 divided by the block dim. So this is just rounding up how many of these are we going to have to do. And the y would be the same. So this is just saying, look, this is how many of each of these we're going to have to do. So then we say, okay, like block x is 0 to the x count. And the same with block y. So that goes from 0 to the y count, right? And then when we want to produce the actual room locations, we just pass those tiles in. And that's it. So here we would say, all right, this is the block dim times the x count, right? So that's how many blocks we've gone in x. This is times the y, right? And then the max is just the min plus the dim. That's it. That's it. And then we're going to generate all of the blocks, just one after the other, after the other, after the other. That is not being used anymore. The dim is supposed to be block dim. And this is block vol now. So let's call it what it actually is. And go from there. Nope. Oh, caps lock. So that seems better. And I don't know what this will do. No one does. No one can possibly know what it does. I'm going to probably set this to debug so I can see what it's complaining about, because I'm not sure what actually might overflow when we do this. Like I said, that probably isn't going to work because there's too many entities right now, and I don't really know what the status of the codebase is for some of those things, but we'll see. All right, so this should give us an assertion somewhere, right? So that's a little weird. So do we just never repack the entities for some reason in this code path? Like, what happens on the end grid edit thing? Like, does this not get called? So that should have happened, though. So that's a little bit weird. Let me see that again. Unpacked entity count is less than max unpacked entity count. So we do end world change. We repack. That seems busted. Like, why is that not doing anything? So what's the actual number? Just out of curiosity, how much is 32 times 32 times 2? So if it's only 2048 entities, yeah, I don't understand. Why is it not repacking? So it looks like when you come through here, it goes through the unpacked entities. Like, this should repack them, right? So in theory, the reason this doesn't actually happen is just because it automatically happens on entry here. And what it looks like is it says, like, okay, if you're, like, are we actually blowing out the number of entities? Like, within that range, are we creating more than 16,000? I suppose it's possible because it's only 32 by 30. If it's really 1,000, and like, what about this call right here, where you look to see if the count is exceeded? I don't get it. I really don't. This code must be kind of broken and we just didn't notice. But I'm not sure exactly how, right? Because this should take care of that by putting the entities, like, by putting the entities away as necessary. Does this never trigger? Wow. Am I doing something stupid like passing the same dimensions all the time or something? Or is this code just busted? Because there should be no entities in there when you actually go, right? So the second time through, let's see what happens. like the first time through, so here's the values in question. Unpack entity count should go up by, like, you know, something like that number, right? So, and it did. Now, when we go in here, when we reopen it now, it should be is outside volume on all of these things, right? But it's not. So why are they not outside the volume? So that's just busted. What are we passing for those values? Are we passing something bogus? Wow. This is some pretty sleepy coding. Yeah, we just created the same square over and over and over again. So it couldn't purge any of them out. Wow. Just bad. Just bad programming. How did nobody see that? What are you guys doing? You're paying even less attention than I am to this code. Unbelievable. Everyone gets a demerit today. All right. So now we don't really know what to expect here. Also, it looks like we've got negative values, so I probably have to change the way I'm doing this because I started at 0, which is not what I was supposed to do. So that was a mistake. This has to actually be plus the min tile, so it's got to be min tile ix plus, right? Min tile iy plus. And then let's see what this does with an O2 switch. All right. Yeah, everyone is fired. The sandwich maker is here talking about food. Meanwhile, a glaringly obvious bug gets by everyone in the chat for the entire time. Like, what the heck, guys? Like, seriously? All right, so I don't know what the heck this did, but like, it looks like it worked, right? I mean, here I am hopping along this path, and like, the problem we're having currently is the room, like, it won't stream in the next part because the room boundaries aren't set, so it's never moving the simulation origin. So that seems bad. And I don't know. Yeah, like, I don't really know what we want to do about that. We'll probably have to just make that code be a little bit better so it doesn't care. I also might make the hero light a little bit brighter for now so I don't have to deal with it. So here's the current light, and maybe I'll switch it up so that there's also this one. I mean, that, yeah. So, it kind of looks like it worked exactly right. I mean, you can see that it created the paths exactly where the paths are. So that was pretty straightforward. Um, but yeah, I don't think this is now paging in things anymore because I don't think the room boundaries, it was supposed to have room boundaries set. But hey, look, right? It's like you can't go outside of the regions that you're not supposed to go outside of. And along the paths, there are paths, and then in between, there's uh, there's trees. So that all worked. But yeah, I don't know what to do about the whole, like, we go hmm um so I don't really remember like what that code does, but I think the way it works is it always sets the simulation center to be like where the room boundary was, and I don't know how that would be what that is doing right now at all. Uh so uh, um so like what did we do when we added that for the block? So generate block was just like, oh, add the room here and make it relative and then make a camera offset. So maybe if I just change the block dim to smaller, I don't know if that actually helps us here. It might. Maybe just to create a place where we can end for today. But if this were going to be like 16 by 16 instead, then maybe that would do it. I'm not sure. We have to go look at how that paging code is working, I guess is what we really need to do. But like what I'm looking for is this should jump around as we move, and it's not. And it looks like when it does, I don't know what this is broken here as well for some reason, which I'm not sure why, because I don't think it should be. So we're still having some problem with it thinking that it can't get rid of things. I can try doing an OD on this and just to see what we get. But super slow in debug mode. So yeah, it has that same problem where it did not like pack these entities back up again. But why? So I'm not sure what time it is right now. I don't know if this is a good stopping point. How long have we been streaming for? We've been going for 2 hours. So I think what I'll probably do is end it there. And I guess what I'd say is that next week I think maybe we start to clean that stuff up. We go figure out what's going on with that pack code. Maybe we want to do the pass where we take out the 3D part of everything as well. That might be the right time to do that. This seems like it's going okay. We are going to need to have some way of putting lights around here. Like, I'm not sure where we're going to place lights. We're going to need little forest lights, otherwise we wouldn't be able to see anything. But so we are going to need a little bit extra apron here too, right? So probably we would also need, when we do the world bounds computation, that probably needs to be a little bit stiffer, right? It needs to be like, hey, this is more like 40 by 30 or something. All right. So I think that's seems like it's about right. So yeah, I think that's really where we want to start to take a look at the chunk thing again. We want to pull Z out completely, but I think we'll start on that next week maybe instead. All right. So that's not bad actually, and that runs totally fine, oddly enough. So the startup time is actually not that large for rasterizing the whole thing. Like that did this whole region, which is ridiculous, right? So that's good too, because it means we don't really have to worry about it too much, because it's obviously something that could be pretty easily optimized. If it's already that fast and we're doing the dumbest possible thing, then we probably don't have to worry too much. And like it, I mean, hey, it actually creates the correct shapes, right? You can see that it's totally doing what we want. So yeah, we just need to kind of start cleaning that code up. Delete a bunch of code. I think we can now. Most of the Z handling stuff we just delete. And then I think we're good to go. Is there going to be a stream next week? Probably. All right, so that's it. I did want to mention before I go, so it's hard because we record ahead of time, so I may get this wrong, but I want to say that not this coming Friday, but the Friday after, so the last Friday in September, we're doing on this channel, we will be doing a Molly Movie Club stream as well. Oops, Molly Movie Club. So if you happen to be a member of Molly Movie Club as well, and you're watching right now, on this channel, we are going to try to do a live stream of Molly Movie Club as well. So take a look for that. There should be a notice that we're going to post on the Molly Movie Club website, and we're going to try to watch a movie together on with the watch party thing on this channel. So if you have a particular movie that you think might be good that supports watch party, right? So it's got to be an Amazon Prime like watch party-able thing. But if you've got one that you think you want to do, if you're a Molly Movie Club member, post about it when you see the thing come up, because we're going to pick one to watch together, and we've never done that before. It's probably pretty fun. So definitely check that out. All right. Other than that, I'll be here next week to play around with cleaning up the code for the streaming there, because I think it's overly complicated because it was doing like way more stuff than we needed. And so if we just rip out the Z and clean up how the blocks get paged in, we can probably keep it pretty straightforward, and should be okay. So that's it. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back here next week. Until then, everyone, have fun programming, and I will see you on the internet. Take it easy, everybody.